In that dark, forgotten corner of the empire, I made a vow. Not to the gods, not to my husband, but to myself. I swore that if I ever returned to the palace, I would never be a pawn again. I would be the hand that moves the pieces. I would be the one they feared. Now, I am back, and I have come to collect on that vow. The dawn of the 8th century in the great Tang Dynasty. The era of China's only female emperor, Wu Zetian, has just ended, but her shadow looms large. Into the heart of the capital, Shangan, returns a woman forged in the crucible of suffering. Wei. For years, she and her husband, the weak-willed Emperor Zhongzong, had lived in exile, stripped of their titles, in constant fear of assassination by the formidable Wu Zetian. During those dark years, she was his rock, his only confidant. As he trembled with fear, she would whisper, "There is no need to fear fate. Why worry about death?" Now, with Wu Zetian gone and her husband restored to the dragon throne, she has returned not as a victim, but as an empress with a debt to collect. She had tasted the bitterness of powerlessness, and she had sworn to herself that she would never taste it again. The palace welcomed back an emperor, but it was the empress who held the true ambition. Emperor Zhongzong was a gentle soul, ill-suited for the viper's nest of the court. He was also a man who owed his wife everything. Empress Wei used this debt to her full advantage. She became the true power behind the throne, her voice a constant, persuasive whisper in her husband's ear. While he was content with the title of emperor, she managed the reality of power. She attended court from behind a screen, just as Wu Zetian had once done, her suggestions becoming imperial commands. She filled the court with her own family and allies, stacking the deck in her favor. The emperor, grateful for her loyalty in exile and blinded by his affection, allowed her unprecedented influence. He saw a devoted partner. The rest of the court saw a puppet master, and they watched with a mixture of fear and awe as the empress began to weave a web of power that would soon entangle the entire empire. She was no longer the emperor's wife. He was becoming her first and most powerful subject. Empress Wei was not alone in her ambition. She had a powerful and far more reckless ally, her favorite daughter, the beautiful and entitled Princess Anle. Anle had grown up hearing stories of her grandmother, Wu Zetian, and she believed it was her destiny to become the next great female ruler. She was even more audacious than her mother, openly demanding that her father name her crown princess, an unprecedented title for a woman. She was the fire to her mother's ice. While Empress Wei moved with calculated patience, Princess Anle acted with impulsive greed, building lavish mansions that rivaled the imperial palace and selling government positions to the highest bidder to fund her extravagant lifestyle. Together, they were a formidable force, a mother-daughter duo driven by a shared, burning ambition. They were a threat not just to the court, but to the very foundation of the Tang Dynasty. With the emperor's authority effectively neutralized, Empress Wei and her faction turned the government into a marketplace. The sale of official positions became rampant. Monks, merchants, and local thugs could buy their way into the imperial bureaucracy, receiving official credentials in exchange for vast sums of money that flowed directly into the Yoncle pockets of the empress and her allies. The court, once a place of scholars and statesmen, became bloated with thousands of officials who had no qualifications other than their wealth. The corruption reached such a point that the official seals of appointment could not be produced fast enough. This widespread graft not only enriched the empress's faction, but it also dangerously destabilized the empire, angering the honest officials and the powerful princes who watched as the government was sold off piece by piece. Empress Wei was building a fortress of loyalists, but its foundations were made of pure, corrosive greed. Empress Wei's ambition had a name, Wu Zetian. She did not just want power. She wanted the throne itself. She saw herself as the rightful successor to her formidable mother-in-law, the only other woman to have ever tasted such absolute authority. She emulated Zetian in every way she could. She held court, she built a faction of loyalists, and she began to surround herself with the symbols of imperial power. She believed that the people, having already accepted one female ruler, would surely accept another. But she lacked Wu Zetian's political genius, her patience, and her utter ruthlessness. She was a reflection in a clouded mirror, a woman chasing the ghost of a titan, blind to the fact that the circumstances that had allowed for one female emperor were unique and had passed. Her ambition was not just to rule. It was to become the legend, and she was willing to do anything to achieve it. One major obstacle stood in the way of Empress Wei's dream, the crown prince Li Chongjun. He was not her son, and he despised the corruption of the empress and her daughter, Princess Anle, who openly mocked and humiliated him. He knew that, as long as he was the heir, their power had a time limit. Fearing for his life and the future of the dynasty, the crown prince launched a desperate, premature rebellion. He managed to kill several of the empress's most corrupt allies, but failed to breach the palace gates. The emperor, cowering in fear, was easily convinced by Empress Wei that his own son was a traitor. The rebellion was crushed, and the crown prince was killed while trying to flee. For Empress Wei, it was a perfect victory. Her greatest political rival was eliminated, and she had done it by turning the emperor against his own flesh and blood. The path to the throne was now clearer than ever. By the year 710, only one person stood between Empress Wei and absolute power, her own husband, the emperor. He was weak, but he was still the son of heaven. As long as he lived, she could only ever be the second in command. The court historians would record that the emperor died suddenly after eating a poisoned cake, a cake that had been prepared by his loving daughter, Princess Anle, and served to him by his devoted wife, Empress Wei. In the intimate setting of their private chambers, she made her final, most audacious move. She had supported him in exile. She had guided him on the throne. And now, when he was no longer useful to her, she eliminated him. It was the ultimate act of betrayal, a cold and calculated murder born from an ambition they could no longer tolerate. Any rival, not even the man she had sworn to protect. With the emperor dead, Empress Wei moved with lightning speed to secure her power before the news could cause chaos in the capital. She kept his death a secret for days, issuing imperial edicts in his name while she arranged her succession. She did not take the throne herself, not yet. Following Wu Zetian's playbook, she installed a puppet. She placed her youngest son, a teenager, on the throne as the new emperor, but she kept him as a virtual prisoner within the palace. She herself became the Empress Dowager and Regent, the supreme and undisputed ruler of the empire in all but name. She held the court, she commanded the armies, and she controlled the imperial seals. She had won. She stood at the absolute pinnacle of power, just one small step away from declaring herself the new sovereign of China. It was her moment of greatest triumph, and she was completely blind to the storm that was about to break over her head. But Empress Wei had powerful enemies. Two people watched her every move with growing alarm: Princess Taiping, the formidable daughter of Wu Zixin, and Li Longji, a brilliant and charismatic young prince who was the emperor's nephew. They were not fooled by her power play. They knew she had murdered the emperor, and they knew she planned to usurp the throne and potentially slaughter the entire Tang imperial clan. While the empress was busy celebrating her victory, they were secretly plotting a counter-coup. Li Longji gathered a small, elite force of loyal soldiers and palace guards, preparing to risk everything in a single, desperate night raid. It was a race against time. They had to strike before the empress could. consolidate her power and eliminate them. The fate of the Tang Dynasty would be decided in a single bloody night. The coup was swift and brutal. Li Longji and his men stormed the palace in the dead of night, overwhelming the Empress's unprepared guards. Their first target was the arrogant Princess Anle, who was reportedly admiring her own reflection, when the soldiers burst in and cut her down. The Empress herself was found and killed as she tried to flee. By sunrise, the reign of Empress Wei was over. Her dream of becoming the next female emperor had dissolved in a single night of violence. Li Longji placed his own father on the throne, and a few years later, he himself would become the great Emperor Xuanzong, ushering in one of the most brilliant eras of the Tang Dynasty. Empress Wei was posthumously demoted to the rank of a commoner. Her name was erased, her story becoming a cautionary tale of an ambition so great it devoured everything in its path, including, in the end, itself.